Number 10, Red Skull. Yeah, I bet you never thought you'd see the day. Obviously, this one ranks so low on the list because of, well, just how despicable this whole thing is, despite the fact that it actually makes for quite an interesting story. Red Skull becoming Captain America and, later, President of the United States happens, of course, in a what-if story. Where else would this happen? In this what-if, following the end of World War II, both Hitler and Red Skull are believed to have been defeated, but dun-dun-dun, Red Skull actually survived. Making sure that Steve Rogers was lost at sea after the war was won, Red Skull plotted to manipulate people under the guise of Steve Rogers himself. Red Skull transferred his mind into a clone of Rogers and set about impersonating him, using Rogers' trustworthy reputation and influence to his advantage. Eventually, the real Captain America, however, did return and would end up putting a stop to evil President Red Skull Cap and his army of super soldiers. I feel like anytime you have a Captain America that's like, I'm gonna make an army of super soldiers, you should probably be suspicious of that Cap, because I feel like that's not a thing that Steve would normally do. Number 9, Clark Kent. But not exactly the Clark Kent you're thinking of. In the Amalgam universe, Clark Kent is a normal human who ends up becoming an alternate version of Captain America, known as Super Soldier, after he is given a serum that was created from the blood of an alien baby who crash-landed on planet Earth. Also, I feel like it's really weird that they took an alien baby's blood and made a serum with it. But I digress. This is a pretty dark story in my opinion. While this version might not hold the title of Captain America, he definitely looks the part, well, minus his S for Super Soldier shield, and is meant to be like a version of both Captain America and Superman combined, cause amalgam. He also comes with his own villains such as Green Skull and Lex Luthor, who in this world is actually the head of Hydra. Hail Hydra, says Lex Luthor. Alright friends, before we move on to this next point, if you are enjoying hearing about all these different people that have been Captain America, feel free to give this video a thumbs up and show it. Number 8, James Newman. James Newman became Captain America for a brief moment in time, or really it's more like Captain America took hold of him, I guess. In the alternate reality of Earth 7116, Captain America finds himself rapidly aging and dying. As he loses his strength, he decides to work with specialists and participate in a sort of experiment that allows him to reach out like a sort of Force ghost to other military groups. Even after he passes on, Captain America's ghost is seen by James Newman and him alone while serving in Afghanistan. Cap helps to bolster James's courage and strength when he needs it most, helping him to believe in himself and to perform heroic actions. After escaping a cave-in, Newman finds himself in the middle of an ambush, and Captain America possesses him briefly in order to help Newman not only survive, but defeat his attackers, leading Newman to state that he believes there is a bit of Captain America in all of us. Aw, what a sweet moral. You can be a hero too. It's true though, if you actually just were like, hey, I'm gonna be a hero today and do good things, you can do that. You should do that. Everyone should be a hero for a day every now and then. It's a nice way to help people out.
Number 7, 300 soldiers. So these soldiers are shocked at what's unfolding before them. First, they aren't told orders about this shady mission, and now their superior is getting shot and the MI6 is involved. What is going on? They gathered 300 of these soldiers, these African American soldiers. This new lieutenant is just a total dick. And when the soldiers ask again, hey, what's going on? He just tells them to do as he says, and maybe him and his men will make it out alive. So sure, they load into these trucks and they head out. They have no choice. Now these soldiers' families started to receive letters, these lies, saying that these soldiers were no longer alive, that they were killed in action. And we catch up to one of these brave men in the second observatory room. They don't even refer to him by name, they just call him Subject A23. And at 1700 hours, they administered more serum into his arm. Afterwards, the room cleared and this poor guy reacted horribly to the serum, and sadly, he didn't survive. The soldiers were being used as test subjects for a super soldier serum. Meanwhile, Faith is in the midst of planning a funeral for Isaiah, while Isaiah is still alive. Just heartbreaking stuff. These soldiers that did survive the serum, well, it was a small number, and even so, they were having trouble coping with its chemical compounds. But it didn't take long for Faith to see the flaws in this whole story.
Number 6, Roberta Mendez. One of the 2099 versions of Captain America. Roberta Mendez became Captain America unwillingly after her husband dosed her with the super soldier serum, kind of against her will. In fact, Roberta didn't even know she was Captain America, as Cap and Roberta were actually basically two separate personas residing in the same body. Trigger words are usually deployed here to manipulate Roberta's mental mental state into switching between her Cap persona and just her everyday Roberta persona. This version of Captain America is part of Alchemax's Avengers and is believed to have the same level of durability and strength as her 616 counterpart, Steve Rogers.
Number 5. Captain Marvel. When Captain Marvel initially took up the mantle of her former friend, colleague, and former love interest Marvel, Captain America was one of the people standing by her side, urging her that it actually was the right choice. He told her that Marvel would have wanted her to take it and that Carol had more than earned the title as a former leader of the Avengers, as well from years of superhero service, often spent saving the world multiple times over. Captain America and Carol Danvers both have a military background. They don't just get along and often agree on tactics and plans, but the two of them also have a fiercely strong mutual respect for one another.
Number 4. Roscoe Simmons. Steve Rogers hasn't always been Captain America, and there have been a few times that his frustration with the government and the politics that sometimes comes along with the name has caused him to escape into another mantle, leaving the Captain America name and looking for someone to step in and replace him during his absence. Roscoe Simmons was a promising candidate given the seal of approval by Steve Rogers himself, who at the time was operating under the name NEWMAN, which you might remember from the MCU, because there's kind of a little Nomad reference in there. Falcon Sam Wilson even trained Simmons himself, but expressed concern as to if Simmons was really prepared enough to be Captain America. Falcon was worried that Roscoe might not only be hurt in the line of duty, but may even wind up dead. And he was right to be worried about that, turns out, because that is exactly what happened. When Red Skull learned that the Captain America he was facing was not in fact Steve Rogers, but his replacement, Roscoe Simmons, in a rage he killed Simmons, seeking also to teach Rogers a lesson in the process about attempting to find a replacement and leave his mantle. Red Skull's like, "You're my nemesis and you can never do anything else." Red Skull crucified Simmons and tortured him to death. Roscoe's death did inspire Steve to return as Captain America, despite his continuing frustration with the government. Roscoe Simmons, R.I.P. I feel bad for Roscoe Simmons. Number 3, John Walker.
Number 3, thrown into an energy core and surviving. In Captain America number 38 in 1998, Captain America faces an adversary known as Protocide, a revived proto-super soldier. Protocide was given fake memories that back in World War II, Steve Rogers had killed him to remain the only American super soldier, which obviously isn't true. During a fight between the two, and a ton of Hydra agents, Cap saves Protocide from falling into an energy core. How does Protocide thank him? By throwing Steve into the energy core to kill him. Steve somehow survives using his shield as a platform to stand on while trying to think of a way out of the core. He quickly decides to sacrifice his own protection, subjecting himself to the full power of the core, to instead use his shield with the help of SHIELD, that's the acronym SHIELD, not the actual vibranium shield, to bust his way out of there with his clothes ripped to shreds and his body still intact. If that's the power of peak human conditioning, sign me up.
Number 2, Bucky Barnes. Also known as the Winter Soldier, Bucky Barnes was originally Captain America's young sidekick from way back in 1941. For years we thought Bucky was dead until Ed Brubaker brought him back as Russia's brainwashed operative and later on, by extension, Hydra's brainwashed assassin, where we'd come to know him as Winter Soldier. Fortunately, Captain America was able to give Bucky back his true mind and memories using the Cosmic Cube, and Bucky then set out on a mission of atonement, before being tossed into the position of Captain America himself, after Cap was suspected of being dead after being shot by a time-traveling bullet during the events of Civil War. True story. Bucky would take up Cap's shield, costume, and the name himself temporarily. Eventually, he would return to his Winter Soldier mantle after he was put on trial for the crimes that he'd committed in his former life, which honestly tend to have a way of coming back to haunt him no matter what good he does. I feel like Bucky's always haunted by those old Winter Soldier days. But that's fair, it's probably pretty traumatizing. Number 1, Falcon. Falcon was the chosen successor for the Captain America title in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, with an elderly Steve Rogers who went back in time to live out his life with Peggy, passing on the shield to his friend Sam Wilson at the end of Endgame. and I guess near the end of his life. He was pretty old there. We don't know if this is something that will stick in the MCU, but in the comics, Sam Wilson has already stepped into Steve's shoes, serving as Captain America after Steve found himself rapidly aged. The major difference between Sam and Steve's approach to being Captain America is that Rogers preferred to stay out of politics, whereas Wilson believes that it's actually his duty to get involved in them. I personally think in the MCU what's going to happen is we're going to have US Agent, who's going to be the person that the government picks, and then Sam Wilson, they're going to be like, we don't care that Captain America passed the shield on to you. It's our mantle, we do what we want. But hopefully the government will come around, and then Sam will get to be Captain America again. Or he'll convince John Walker like Steve did. Anyways, you're not coming here to hear my theories on Sam Wilson's future in the MCU, but that's what I think.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Faith. To start from the beginning, we dive into Truth, Red, White, and Black, released in 2003, written by Robert Morales with pencils by Kyle Baker. Isaiah Bradley grew up in New York City. That's where he met his wife, and this was around the 1940s when the attack on Pearl Harbor happened soon after, and then the US entered the war, so Isaiah had to leave Faith, pregnant too, may I add as well. They were head over heels for each other, madly in love. They spent their honeymoon at the World's Fair in Queens, and he was promising to come back to her. Their daughter, named Sarah Gale, was odd from other soldiers once Isaiah arrived. She was named after her grandmother, so technically both Captain Americas both had mothers with the same name. Fun little fact there. Number 9, the secret mission. Their unit wasn't even told about details for this mission that they were about to take part of. A mission that would be the last for most of them. There was no warning, there was no heads up, they were just passed on information, almost like it was casual. At 2300 hours tonight, they're to take part in a special night training exercise. No gear, no weapons. Now, some of the guys thought that this was because of a previous altercation that had happened with Fauntleroy hours earlier, one of the other soldiers. Now, these asshole soldiers said horrible things to him in passing, and he popped one right in the nose. So now they think maybe it's punishment for that whole thing. It's in fact much worse. Number 8, new orders. Upon arriving to Camp Cathcarl at 2300 hours, Major Brackett was interrupted right before they were all about to head out on this night training exercise. He was interrupted by Colonel Walker Price, military intelligence. He marches up to relieve him of his command. Just like that, direct from command, end of story, no questions, get out of here. The commander states that they're shutting down the entire camp because it turns out Camp Cathcarl never truly existed.
Number 7, Cyclops. That's right, in the alternate future of what appears to be the ultimate universe, known as Earth 81122, an alternate of an alternate, we get an alternate Scott Summers and Jean Grey and Steve Rogers, who all find themselves at one point without powers. Rogers, in losing his powers, also ends up rapidly aging and dies. After his death, it was basically left to Scott Summers to take up the mantle, allowing the name of Captain America to live on, albeit briefly, because he dies. Scott dies. Scott Cap. Captain Scott Summers. Captain Scott Summers of America.
Number 6, the Black Ops team. While Faith was having a hard time coping with Isaiah's apparent passing due to an explosion, the remaining soldiers were used as this Black Ops team, the remaining super soldiers, that is. They were sent to Germany's Black Forest first. Now, these super soldiers were wiping out everybody. One by one, these soldiers started to get taken out. There's arguments about what's right and wrong, what exactly they're doing. They're comparing their stories to Captain America. It's a mess. So finally, Maurice snaps and launches a well-deserved haymaker at Private Merit. And Isaiah Bradley is left to endure a mission that is now deemed a final one. Without the help of any of his Black Ops team, he has to go alone. And he gets himself a fitting suit for the journey.
Number 5, gets his costume charged by Gambit, who explodes it. During the X-Men vs. Avengers event, one-shot comics were produced that pitted single Avengers versus single X-Men. While a lot of these were great stories, there was one that stood out as a surprise. That would be the AVX vs. Volume 1, Number 2, that pitted Spider-Man against Juggernaut and Steve Rogers against none other than Remy LeBeau, Gambit. For those of you who don't know, Gambit has the unusual mutant ability to convert the potential energy stored in an object into kinetic energy, basically turning objects into bombs. Captain America is, well, Captain America though, and he gets a little cocky, not thinking much of the X-Men. After failing the obvious tactic of using Cap's shield as a kinetic bomb, Gambit surprises Cap, charging Steve's armor and catching Steve off guard with a huge explosion. But when the dust settles, Gambit did nothing but get Cap's full, undivided attention. Cap rushes Remy, using his shield to guard against Remy's charged playing cards, and takes him out with a swift uppercut. I'm still a huge fan of Gambit though, can't lie.
Number 4, a familiar face. So while Rogers is being filled in on Isaiah Bradley, he's shocked. He's told every black person in America at one point has heard of Isaiah's story, although what happened to him still remains a mystery. And Steve Rogers, he just feels awful for not being caught up to speed, but he's told to cut himself some slack being in suspended animation and all. So when BET covered the wedding of the century, Storm and Black Panther, T'Challa was recognized as the world's highest profile black superhero. And the media mentioned how the talk of the town was who was going to show up to this wedding. After all, this takes place after the registration of all superpowered beings. So friendships were teetering, so who's gonna show face? Big question. So Falcon arrives with Isaiah Bradley in a wheelchair, and Luke Cage refers to him as the first me. Goliath also immediately recognizes Bradley, but Wolverine does not. Outside the black community, Isaiah Bradley wasn't really known. But inside, the legend of the Black Captain America began to travel around.
Number 3, Peggy Carter. Peggy Carter usually doesn't have superpowers, in most realities. But in the alternate reality we glimpsed into in episode 1 of the Disney Plus What If series, she certainly did. Here, Steve Rogers wasn't Captain America, but in pretty much every reality where he either has held that title or hasn't, he's had respect for Peggy. And this reality was no different. Here, Agent Peggy Carter was the one who ended up getting the serum and became the super soldier hero known as Captain Carter. Steve goes on to become an earlier version of Iron Man, codenamed the Hydra Stomper. One night, over some whiskey, the two confess that the other is their hero, confirming that even here, especially here, Peggy earns Steve's respect and vice versa. Also, it's such a cute moment. It's so cute.
Number 2, Josiah X. In 1953, years prior to Isaiah's release, Faith had moved with Sarah to Mount Vernon, Virginia, and a young woman approached and said that she has Faith's son. Well, what happened was the military harvested some DNA from Isaiah and eggs from Faith during her appendectomy surgery, and after 38 failed attempts, Josiah was born. Faith kept the child for a bit, but felt that she had to leave him on a train for everybody's safety, including his own. And then 25 years later, Josiah returned, he met his family. Now again, he couldn't stick around and he was told to come back when the time was right. When the Bradley family moved back to the Bronx, he would visit more often. Number 1, Eli Bradley. In The Falcon and Winter Soldier, when Sam Wilson would have these conversations with Isaiah, we caught glimpses of his grandson. The young actor Elijah Richardson recently dropped a hint online about his future with Marvel right after that amazing finale aired. So it looks like we're getting one step closer to the Young Avengers on the big screen. Now, his first comic book appearance was in Young Avengers 1, and he of course wanted to follow the path of his grandfather, so he suited up as Patriot. Only thing was, at first he had lied about his abilities. He actually had no powers until he received a blood transfusion from Isaiah down the road. That combined with his skills in parkour and combat, it truly makes for a formidable young Avenger. I really hope we see him in live action soon. He's awesome. He uses a replica of Cap's original shield, and his suit is a combination of Bucky and Isaiah Bradley's uniform. So I can't wait to see that on the big screen.
Number 10, Wolverine. Well, it might not seem like these two see eye to eye. Actually, they often don't. They still hold respect for one another. Wolverine and Captain America actually go way back, with it later being established that they even crossed paths during World War II, with them both serving. Wolverine was going by his given name of James Howlett at that time. Captain America may not like Wolverine's killer instincts, and may have spoken up against the idea initially of him joining the Avengers team, but over the years, Cap has become more accepting of moral ideologies and tactical approaches that differ with his own way of doing things. Wolverine definitely holds Cap in high regard. Even with the two being so different, and over time, it seems that Cap has also come to respect Wolverine. Number 9, Iron Man. It might seem strange to include Tony Stark on this list, considering that the two of these heroes created one of the most divisive events in Marvel's comic book history thus far, Civil War. And yet, despite the fact that these two were on opposite sides, and despite the fact that that conflict tore the superhero community apart, Stark and Rogers still ended up finding a way to move past these events, heal their relationship, and even remain friends. Even when they don't agree, and it's often that these heroes don't agree, they still immensely respect one another, even if they end up on opposite sides of a war. Their respect is so deep that it also led to them getting married in another universe, the alternate Earth of 3490, where Iron Man instead was born female and was known as Iron Woman, aka Natasha Stark. I mean, you gotta have respect if you're marrying someone, right? And friends, before we move on to the next spot, just a quick reminder, if you have not already, please go check out our new channel, Top 10 Nerd Elite, please, please, please. And once you are over there, hit that subscribe. We're gonna have lots of amazing content coming your way, and we don't want you to miss it. Number 8, Namor. Even Hydra Supreme Steven Rogers, aka Alternate Evil Cap, showed some respect for his old friend, Namor. In truth, the real Captain America and Namor go way back, with the two of them serving on the All-Winner Squad and Invaders way back in the day. They teamed up together during World War II and fought side by side, but would each be separated and forgotten by time, as was their fate. Namor would basically lose his memory, and Cap would become frozen in a block of ice. Later, they both served together on the Avengers, and while they might not always see eye to eye and can be quite different personalities, at the end of the day, these old friends will hold one another in high regard, even when forced to fight against each other, as they were when the Phoenix Force returned to Earth in Avengers vs. X-Men, with Captain America specifically taking on Namor, who was one of the Phoenix Five.
Number 7. Fighting Ultimate Hulk. In their first real battle against the Hulk, after he goes on a rampage through the city, the Ultimates try to bring down the big green guy. Giant Man and Iron Man both fail in their fights with Hulk, which is when Captain America enters the fray, dropping a whole tank on top of him. A tank that has Cap sitting inside of it. But this is the Hulk. And no puny tank dropped from hundreds of feet in the air is gonna stop him. Banner rips through the tank and engages Captain America directly. Or should I say that Cap engages him, putting up a hell of a fight, punching him in the face, kicking him where the sun don't shine, and shield bashing Hulk all over, until Hulk starts to absolutely pummel him. Luckily, Thor comes in to take Hulk's attention away, but he lived. He survived.
Number 6, Howling Commandos. The Howling Commandos might not all have superpowers, but each member does have their own skills, and they do have Nick Fury, which I think means we can include them in terms of superhero status. The original Nick Fury in the comics, being older due to his own exposure to a variation of the super soldier serum, actually served in World War II, and was part of a team who would fight side by side with Captain America when he first came into the field. Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos fought alongside Captain America in multiple missions because of how well they all operated together, with them definitely earning Cap's trust and respect. Even when Cap returned from the ice years later, the surviving members of the Howling Commandos were still considered close friends of his. Steve sought them out and was still eager to work closely with the surviving members of the squad.
Number 5, The Punisher. That's right, in Marvel's marvelous world of what ifs, anything is possible, including a world where Frank Castle ends up being chosen to be Captain America instead of Steve Rogers. He does eventually get carried away, like we are so used to seeing him do, and attempt to go on a murderous rampage, but in the end is reined in by none other than Steve himself, who reminds him that he is a role model for all of America, and that he basically has to be better. When Castle offers the mantle of Captain America to Rogers himself, he actually refuses, saying that Frank needs to be Cap because he is a living, mortal man, which makes him, I guess, more relatable to the American people, because in this reality, Rogers is a cyborg. I guess we can't relate with cyborgs. I feel like that's a weird lesson. So yeah, Frank stays on as Captain America, and Steve goes on to fight crime as the Captain. Cyborgs can't be Captain America. How dare they?
Number 4, Human Torch. We're not talking about the Human Torch Johnny Storm of the Fantastic Four. No. Here we are talking about the android version of the hero who fought in World War II, and shares similar abilities but is a completely different being with a completely different name, Jim Hammond. Jim was an AI android created by Professor Phineas T. Horton. Human Torch would end up becoming a superhero and ally to Captain America, Bucky Barnes, and even Namor, serving on both the All-Winner Squad and the Invaders as well. I would argue that because Cap and Hammond have never really had much reason to fight, that he is even more respected by the hero than Namor. Bucky Barnes, when he was Captain America, even risked his own life along with Namor just to rescue Human Torch's remains, and to prevent them from being used in a plot to destroy half of the human life on planet Earth, which is both nice but also probably very important because, you know, heroic stuff, but also, you know, you gotta save your friend's remains. I think that's also important.
Number 3, Isaiah's Truth. The final issue of Truth, Red, White, and Black is present day, with Steve Rogers approaching a man near the grave of Harper Price. He has questions about Isaiah and what happened to him. Now this guy at first doesn't even take Steve seriously. He explained how Project Super Soldier was born when the Germans were still the German government, if you catch what I'm saying. Now since Rogers was stuck in the Pacific, they needed someone. They needed Bradley. Now Steve's not happy at this point. He tells Price that the war was about saving people, not endangering them. Now Price gets what he deserves when Rogers informs him that 2 days earlier he bought enough of Koch International stocks, and that he'll be at the next meeting ready to kick out Price, where he'll then be arrested for all those lives lost. And then we cut back to present day, and although they were sworn to secrecy, the visitors that Isaiah would get were quite a big deal. And yes, Isaiah Bradley is still alive. In 1960, on the day of Kennedy's inauguration, Isaiah was granted a full pardon and he was sworn to secrecy.
Number 2. Falcon. One of the heroes Captain America admires the most has to be his good friend Sam Wilson, aka Falcon. Falcon is one of the heroes who ends up also holding the mantle of Captain America, and for good reason. Aside from Cap, he is also a person who aims to stand up for American ideals, liberty, equality, and justice. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we saw Steve Rogers respect through his actions as well as his words, when he chose to pass on the mantle of Captain America and his shield to Falcon. Sam, however, wasn't initially so sure of how concrete the sentiment was, or if he was ready for the title, but by the end of his and Bucky's Disney Plus series, he found his way to accepting Rogers' offer and his respect. Number 1. Winter Soldier. While Steve was horrified to learn what had happened to Bucky after he went MIA many years before, and much later resurfaced as a super soldier and brainwashed operative and assassin Winter Soldier, over time he would once again come to respect and cherish his friendship with Bucky. Steve respected young Buchanan Barnes so much that he wasn't willing to give up on him when he first came back, and was revealed to have been molded into something more villainous during his years away from Cap. Instead, out of respect for his former partner, Steve worked hard to free him from his brainwashing and give him back his former memories, allowing him to once more think and act for himself, using his own sense of right and wrong as opposed to doing what he'd been programmed to.
Number 10. Willing himself out of a cosmic cube. In Captain America issue 446 in 1968, the Red Skull has captured Captain America inside a cosmic cube, making Steve live in a fantasy where he saves Dr. Ernstein, Bucky never dies, and he gets to see his mother, giving him the goal of defeating the German stash. You know, the task he was created for. His whole dream inside the cube is created from his subconscious desires. It's much like a real dream, where some things just don't make much sense at all. The dream takes place during World War II, but some people have cell phones, and there are technologically advanced airships. That kind of thing. Eventually, Cap and Bucky Barnes make their way to the bunker that the German stash is supposedly in. But just as Steve is about to enter, his subconscious Bucky stops him. Bucky talks to Cap about how things here don't make much sense, how he's supposed to be dead, and how him saying all this is the Captain's subconscious just trying to break through. His subconscious tells him this is a dream. All of a sudden, Captain America is outside the cube and just outside the door to the Red Skull instead. Even the Red Skull is shocked that Captain America has the willpower to break out of a cosmic cube. Number 9. Smashed through multiple walls, beaten, and has a building dropped on his head. In Captain America Volume 4, number 31 and 32, Cap goes to visit his flame at the time, Rachel Layton, also known as Diamondback, who was working undercover for Red Skull. She turned on the Red Skull though because her love for Steve had grown and she couldn't kill him, which resulted in the Red Skull killing her. When Steve arrived, the Red Skull attacked in his superpowered suit. The fight involved Steve being thrown into and through multiple brick walls and through floors of an apartment building, being beaten rather ruthlessly by the Skull, and having the entire building demolished on top of him. Not to mention, this all happened after he had just found his lover dead. But Steve not only survived, he didn't break a single bone. He was able to get up and start fighting again. I mean, not very successfully, until the, surprise, not dead Rachel Layton intervened. Number 8. Used as a Cap missile by War Machine. Multiple times. In Secret Avengers number 10, The secret Avengers have been distracted by a fake godlike entity in order for the mysterious group the Shadow Council, working with a group called the High Dai, to kidnap Sharon Carter as a bargaining chip to trade for Shang-Chi, whose blood will allow the High Dai to resurrect Shang-Chi's father, Zhang Zhu. But none of that matters. I just want to talk about when War Machine threw Captain America like a spear right into John Steele, another super soldier, slamming him into the ground in such a cool comic book image. Look at that! Captain America being Captain America just does a barrel roll out of it too. Completely unfazed.
Number 7, Isaiah Bradley. Isaiah Bradley was one of the first super soldiers to have come into being after Steven Rogers was transformed into one himself and made Captain America. For years, the white community of superheroes was actually completely unaware of Isaiah Bradley, his role as a hero, or his accomplishments from World War II. However, when Captain America did discover Isaiah's old uniform, he decided to dig a little deeper into the legend of the Black Captain America, and ended up paying Isaiah and his wife Faith a visit. He returned Isaiah's old uniform, was regaled with his old war stories by Faith, and ended up asking to take a picture with Isaiah Bradley as well, for his wall. Once he learned of Isaiah Bradley and his role, Captain America too became one of the heroes to respect and admire him.
Number 6. Having the super soldier serum sucked out of him. In Captain America Volume 7, Issue 21, the villain Iron Nail had gained control of a giant helicarrier mech called Gungnir, which is honestly really cool looking, and was using it to attack and destroy the city of Neurovekistan. I'm so sorry if I messed that up. The captain had infiltrated the mech and was confronting Iron Nail inside. Now look, his name may be lame, but in their fight he actually stabbed Captain America multiple times with tentacles that pulled the super soldier serum right out of his body. This caused Steve to be depowered, and on top of that, it rapidly aged the captain. Right as Steve was about to save the day too. Just kidding! Cap won, throwing his shield into Gungnir's core, and with the help from Sam Wilson, the Falcon defeated Iron Nail and escaped the mech.
Number 5. Black Captain America. Issue 5 of Truth, Red, White, and Black opens with Isaiah Bradley suited up in the Stars and Stripes, one of Captain America's uniforms, and he was just laying these guys out. A full-on super soldier, a full-on Captain America with the shield and all. The shield was triangular and he decorated it with the W campaign eagle crest. Now the German soldiers thought that the Americans were bombing them, but they didn't see any planes. They had no idea what hit them. This was the mission of his life. He had to lay TNT down all over the German camps. He was crying while he did this entire thing. It felt awful. He had to do this. He tried to save everybody held at this camp. He did what he could, and at the end he was assumed to have not survived. Issue 6 shows us Isaiah Bradley is captured. He's being held at the base, still in uniform. Then the issue cuts back and forth between present Cap, Steve Rogers, interrogating Merritt, and that's when he finds out about the secret history of Black Captain America.
Number 4. A backhand from Thanos with the Infinity Gauntlet. During the iconic fight between the Avengers and the Mad Titan armed with the completed Infinity Gauntlet, Thanos easily beats almost all of the Avengers. Near the end of the fight, only Captain is left, and he calls Thanos out to battle him one-on-one. Cap's got some great lines here. As long as one man stands against you, Thanos, you will never be able to claim victory. A swing from the Mad Titan, and a dodge from Steve. But when hands sprout out of the ground, holding Steve in place, Thanos swings down on Cap's shield, yelling, "Then die you shall," and completely shatters the shield of Captain America. As he is about to land a killing blow on Steve, the Silver Surfer shows up in the nick of time and distracts Thanos, who, after getting a little punch from Cap, instead knocks Steve out cold with a quick backhand to the face. Not bad for an enhanced human against a mutant Eternal wielding the Infinity Gauntlet, who even the cosmic beings have trouble with. Unfortunately, us here at Top 10 Nerd, we don't have a super soldier serum. We gotta do this to survive. And it's because of you guys that we are able to do that. When you guys subscribe and like our videos, it lets YouTube know that we deserve to be here. Thank you guys for all your support. Alright.
John Walker was the man chosen to replace Captain America after he quit, more permanently this time. Captain America decided to leave the mantle behind when he no longer felt it was a good idea to be working for the government, who at the time were quite corrupt. Although Steve Rogers would continue to operate as a hero, he wouldn't be able to use the name of Captain America as, well, it technically belonged to the federal government. Instead, he would become known as the Captain, and the US government would recast the heroic role of Captain America. John Walker ended up being the man they chose, who proved to be a much more violent and ruthless Captain America in comparison to Rogers, having no qualms about killing those who got in his way. In the end, Rogers was able to convince Walker of his misdeeds and even helped him to reform. Walker ended up giving the mantle back to Steve and would go on to become the redemption-seeking hero US agent.
Number 2. ZOLA virus. When Captain Rogers is teleported to the ZOLA dimension in Captain America Volume 7 in 2013, he is infected with a virus called the ZOLA virus, which puts him in constant pain and attempts to slowly take over his mind. While in Dimension Z, Steve gets his butt beat by Jet Zola, Arnim Zola's daughter, who counters his every move, almost breaking his back, and pushes him into a crowd of mutates who chew him up a bit. Then his ribs are broken and beaten by gamma-mutated cloned monstrosities of himself called Captain Zolandia. He gets blasted by Zola using his robotic body, and to top off the fight, he falls off of a cliff. Cap then just gets up, and using a knife, he cuts the ZOLA virus out of his chest. He cut a hole in his own chest and went on fighting. His mother did tell him getting back up was always the right thing to do though. Number 1. Getting capped in the dome. Captain America has been shot so many times it makes 50 Cent jealous. Cap's been shot in the gut from a sniper, shot in the shoulder, shot in the leg multiple times and didn't even notice or care. But did you know that Steve Rogers has been capped in the dome? In Captain America and the Falcon issue 13 in 2011, Captain America takes a bullet to the dome that was meant for Sam Wilson. He was immediately rushed to hospital, and though he put up a fight, he was pronounced dead at 3:08 a.m. At the beginning of the next issue though, he suddenly wakes up, with the cause of his revival being placed on his, and I'm quoting this, unique metabolism. Captain America died for a grand total of 12 minutes that day, but he survived because of his metabolism. What?